Yeah, some clarinet. Friends, this is Greg Schubert and Gemini Brett here. I thought I might as well just send this live on YouTube. I'm really excited to see what happens. And I figured it's something I'm going to want to look back to, and it's going to make it easier for me to do. And folks who have been following my stream recently have seen my current running obsession with harmonics and harmonic astrology and the music. Astro Bridge, which is something that Greg Schubert here has been studying for a long, long time. Um, yeah, and I've been exploring the harmonic series more and more on my saxophone. I was like, I wonder, like, what other saxophonists do astrology? And it's like, well, I know Greg does. And I also know you to be kind of a master of the study of harmonics. So really wanted to pick your brain a little bit. How in the heavens are you?
Yeah, yeah, look really good, Brett. Yeah, going really well. Um, Harmonics. When I've been looking at harmonics and astrology, that music astro bridge as you just described it. It's the bridge is there. It's hard to get a foothold on walking across it though.
Yeah, it's a water bridge.
Yeah,
But every now and then there's a miracle.
you got to know the answer to all the secret questions.
Right. And all the questions to the answers, it seems. I want to show you something that I've been tripping on lately, speaking of walking out in nature walks. So I believe in Australia, and I should, I guess, say that Greg's in Melbourne, Australia, which is
Uh,
just this,
Sorry,
oh,
not Melbourne. A
oh,
long way
where?
from Melbourne. I'm in Grafton on the north coast of New South Wales, not far from
Oh,
Brisbane.
my bad. I forgot
Yeah,
that.
okay.
Obviously. I thought were as far south of the equator as I am north here in the Bay Area of California, but that's not true. That is Melbourne.
Mm.
Um, do you have gums where you are, eucalyptus trees as we call them up here?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, so, an amazing thing about the gums, let me get a larger example. So you'll see things like this, like they five,
Mm.
but they also four, and they also three,
Wow.
and they also six. I have a six here. It's crazy. And like literally on the same branch,
On the
they've
same
got
branch.
like fourfold and threefold geometries. And it's like,
Wow.
wow, the gum is hip to the harmonic series, right?
Well, yeah, a lot of plants only do one subdivision.
Yeah, I've never seen that more. There's the whole four-leaf clover good luck charm thing, right? But usually it seems like a plant is rather committed to its shape and its number of petals and whatnot.
Mm.
So, and I've been trying to research why eucalyptus trees do this, and I always find my way to these articles of like 10 things you didn't know about eucalyptus trees, and it's never one of them. And I'm like, what about this? Right? So it's just one of these mysteries as it is, yeah.
Mm. Well, I don't know if it's a good idea to have lots of eucalypts around the place at the moment. They're quite flammable and they burn hot.
Were they native in Australia? They're not here. They were brought by the Spanish.
Yeah, yeah. No, we're covered in them in Australia. There's so many species. You know, there's there's some gums that just have they'll grow up. I don't know, 40 or 50 meters high. They're big ones that are just straight and then a crown at the top.
Hmm.
Um, the blue gums do that. And there's a few places where you can find a whole forest of them where there's no other big trees. There's just an understory of some ferns, and then blue gums in every direction you look. And then there's other gums that are really gnarly and twisty. And Gophra set of gums they twist around and they look like they're kind of Indian dancers. The way their branches just all twist around and go into strange shapes. No, they're
Wow, cool.
wonderful trees.
Yeah, and they I mean, maybe they like harmonic series as well because they're not too high on the fundamental, right? They like have very few roots, right? It's like somehow a tree that like unlike most seems to have most of its body above the ground and very little bit of it below, where usually you find that kind of equal balance. Yeah.
Mm.
So walking through the gums is something we share, and also a love for astrology and music. And Greg first reached out when he heard that I was looking at the two and offered some really wonderful advice and teachings. And yeah, I feel personally a little bit more equipped to have a like I'm just really excited to ask some questions for you as I've learned a few things, and I think catching up to some of the stuff that you shared with me last time we spoke, which was a private conversation. And I mean, just warning to the folks that are listening here live or later. I mean, astrology, which most of you speak, because why else would you be looking at my channel? It's itself a very strange foreign language of jargon. Musical harmonies and another very foreign language of jargon. And so there'll be some spaces here today where you probably lose it. But
Mm.
Greg's got some instruments in hand. I have a saxophone here, so maybe some demonstration can happen. But I'm in this quest right now to tie this kind of I don't know, in the Western tradition anyway, in a sense, like a newer branch of astrology called harmonic astrology, to learn more about it through the astro music connection. And also, I mean, harmonic astrology is as old as the first full moon because any relationship between two planets or 2 points can be described as a division of the circle or as a fraction of the circle or as like as we'll see in like the division of a vibrating string as a harmonic of that key or fundamental vibration. And so the harmonic series, which is really convenient to explore musically because you can actually experience it sensually, right? You can hear it. It really applies to everything that vibrates, like Greg and me and all of you and the gum trees and everything.
I electric shaver motor in the morning. If I'm
Uh,
shaving, the electric motor that has a fundament of about, I guess it must be related to 50 hertz because that's our 240 volts here. But all the harmonics off it too, you can hear them
well, you can
if you
hear
know
them.
where to listen.
And that's another thing about Greg is you'll hear as we explore, like this man's ears are next level. Um, and so actually, I got to get back to something you had told me before about a band that you had that played, and was it like a 37 pitch octave or
31 notes to the octave.
good golly.
Yeah, look, this is where the whole connection, like if you look at, you mentioned before this, in some ways harmonic astrology is new, and yet it's kind of seems to be harmonic divisions of the circle seem to go right back to the the Ptolemaic aspects and other things like that. Um, when you look at music history, harmonics harmonics are involved in the tuning systems that have been used historically. Less involved nowadays with our modern tuning, which is called equal temperament. They're still there, involved in that though, but um, completely separately, if you like, harmonics are involved in the tone color. Harmonics in sound are what makes a clarinet sound different from a saxophone. Um, Reinforcing or dampening harmonics in the sound of an instrument leads to the shape of the instrument. The violin is the shape it is, the guitar is the shape it is, the clarinet and the saxophone are the proportions and the shapes that they are, all in the quest to either reinforce or dampen certain harmonics that are in the tone color um, to please our ears.
Yeah, and I mean, the metaphor I've used is if the kind of amplitude of different harmonics in the series differentiate to my ear the timbre of a clarinet versus tenor saxophone, then perhaps the higher harmonics of our natal charts can also help me see more of the different instrument that is you versus
Give you
me,
more nuanced
right?
insight. Yeah.
And I mean, we see that in the natal chart, of course, also. And the natal chart, in a sense, it's like the fundamental vibration that is you, right? It's like the root note. Um,
The set of vibrations that is you.
right, yeah, because we can also look at every like the what is the relationship between the sun and the moon and moon and Mercury and moon and Venus and all of the things and three
Uh,
things and right,
Look,
it's endless.
we might say that, Brett, you've got a big wind section in your orchestra, and other people might have a big cello section in their orchestra. It's like there's this whole raft of sounds in the metaphor, just using the symphony orchestra as a kind of metaphor. And if which sounds are we going to go with as we live? Which sounds are we going to want to own, and which sounds are we going to want to go, oh no, that's not my sound, that's coming from somewhere else. When in actual fact it's probably in there.
I'm going to show an image here. This is from the Wikipedia page on the harmonic series in music. But again, this applies to everything that vibrates, and all is vibration. And so generally speaking, any vibration, like if we have this wave kind of going back and forth, and if that's at a certain frequency, if it's at a frequency within the range of human hearing, like Greg's electric razor, right, then we hear it. But within any fundamental tone, we also hear these higher harmonics, like at all the equal divisions of, an air column in the clarinet, the string on the guitar, which is maybe an easier place to see this. So maybe Greg, I'll ask you to show a few things, but basically, like as the root wave is vibrating, there's also half lengths of that wave are vibrating, and if you like a wave of half the length has twice the frequency, which you hear is twice the pitch. We call it an octave in music, and we'll show you why. Also, a third of the thing is vibrating, and you hear one third, and you hear two thirds of it, and a quarter of the string, and a fifth, and a sixth, and in a sense, that would go on to infinity, but it quickly ascends beyond the limits of human
Well,
hearing.
also in that diagram you just had up, there was a little bit of the amplitudes were not adjusted in a kind of meaningful way in that diagram.
Right, they all just seem equal.
When you, yeah, whereas they're not. The amplitude of this string here, you can even see, I don't know if your frame rate's fast enough, but you can see that
I'm seeing it. That
just
the
above
string's
my
wiggling.
you can, yeah. So the amplitude's got a certain distance, and then when you divide the string in two, you can see again. I'm going to leave my finger on the string. Now the
And can you
maximum
show,
amplitude is
Greg,
down
can you
here.
show more of the guitar so I can see it from like both sides of the string and how you're dividing that string perfectly in half at that fret?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So halfway between the bridge down here and the nut up the top, up that end. It happens to be the 12th fret, but that's kind of another layer. But initially, when I was showing you that amplitude at first, the maximum amplitude is in the middle of the string, which is what those diagrams were showing, But then here, I've stopped the string in the middle. Underneath my finger is not going to vibrate. The maximum amplitude here is somewhere about here, as well as halfway somewhere up there. Don't know if you'll see the amplitude because already it's shrunken compared to what it was. I can see in the image that string's vibrating, but I can't see much of it really. So that half's vibrating as well. Then in thirds, you would just go up to a third of the way along. Now, of course, that's a third of the way from this end, but there's another point up here, which is a third of the way from that end. Right?
Can you fully pitch that so we can hear that fifth above the octave?
Yeah. So if we call that the tonic or the root or the do, do re mi fa sol, do re mi fa sol, sol la ti do. Now I'm on the fourth harmonic. Now the fourth harmonic, dividing it by 4, is also here and is also here. So that, you've got the 3 notes and so on. But each time we go up, there's a fifth harmonic. There it is. There'll be another one here. There it is. And another one about here. There it is. Each time you go up another harmonic, the amplitude of that harmonic is it's essentially an inverse, so it's only that amplitude is only a fifth of what the fundamental harmonic would be if I hit the strings the same way. Now the thing is with this is pretty well understood in a way, like Pythagoras with his monochord was working with harmonics and the intervals between them. And really we historically musicians used harmonics to tune their instruments right through until, well, some musicians still do, but in kind of Western music, if I call it that, at least, right through until about the 19th century, when this thing called equal temperament, which had started in the 18th century, but it took a while to catch on. Equal temperament and harmonic tuning are really quite different things, and I think there's an astrological connection here to be somehow made when we divide that circle of the ecliptic into 12 equal segments. We get 30 degrees each. In some ways that might be like equal temperament, because the octave in equal temperament is divided into 12 exactly equal steps. But without getting too mathematical on you, or maybe getting too mathematical on you, each step is the 12th root of 2. And if you think about when could humans first actually calculate the precise value of the 12th root of 2? Well, we kind of still can't because it's an irrational number, but we can get pretty close to it. But really only after calculus was invented, which of course is an 18th century thing, or 17th.
Yeah, that's cool. I really hadn't thought that the advent of calculus could lead to this equal temperament tuning. Yeah, so I mean, to take that metaphor of, like the tropical zodiac, for example, or any equal sign zodiac being like an equal temperament where you take the thing and you divide it equal slices. I mean, there's two ways where it doesn't necessarily agree with in the sky. One would be like a constellational zodiac, which is in no kind of temperament because you have constellations like the priestess, which they'll call Virgo, 47 degrees of ecliptic arc, and Aries is like 15. But like if you look at another way to see that would be that if we consider the ecliptic or the path of the sun, which of course is described as Earth orbits the sun as a circle, and the orbit's the elliptical, not circular. We'll get back to that. But if we consider that to be like a circle and we're dividing into 12 equal slices of space, right? So we take the 360-degree circle and divide into these 12 30-degree signs, as we call them. Because the orbit's not elliptical, like the Earth is closest to sun in January and furthest away in July, right? Like it is equal space, but not equal time. Right.
No.
So like the sun actually takes less time to move through tropical Capricorn than it does through Cancer, because the Earth is closer to the sun at that time. So we have like equal space and unequal time, which leads to interesting things like switching in calendars between 30 and 31 days and stuff like that. But it's a fun way to just say, well, like what would it be if we actually created a zodiac based upon 30 days of solar travel versus 30 degrees of space, right? You would get a different animal. But you shouldn't do 30 days. You do like 1/12 of the year. Well, you're going to get into a really weird fraction again, because you're dividing 365.242 days or whatever by 12, right? Yeah, I think I'll show people the circle of fifths.
Well, I was wondering, could I share a diagram
Yeah,
here.
totally. You're set up to share your screen.
Okay, I'll share this. Okay, here we go. Let's share this window here.
It's on. I gotta make it bigger on my side.
Yeah, I might be able to make it a little bit bigger here as well. It could help.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's great.
It's not quite fitting as much as I wanted, but I'm just looking at this line here that says Ionian.
Hmm.
That's the same as the ordinary major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You know, there's just another name for it. It's the name of the mode that it's in. And this is looking at a tuning system that's not equal temperament. And I'll quickly get to the point here. The steps in the scale are unequal steps. They're not all the same size. Whereas in equal temperament, if I go to a piano and play a D major scale, all my tones are exactly the same size and all my semitones were exactly half that size. And so there's only two intervals, tones and semitones, and the tone is exactly double the semitone. So everything's a whole number multiple of semitones. And in this system that I've got up on the screen now, which is not equal temperament, you can see the first step up from D to E is 9 on 8. Now that's a ratio of what, 1.125. Then the next step up from E to F sharp is 10 on 9. That's not the same size as 9 on 8.
Right.
Whereas on the piano, those two steps would be the same size. So I just wanted to quickly point this out, that when we go back to any music, kind of, I'm going to say earlier than Mozart, and I think I'm pretty right. There's a lot of, a lot of misunderstanding even amongst musicians. You know, people think of Bach having famously written the well-tempered clavier. They conflate well-tempered with equal temperament. It was not. Bach's temperament was not equal. He had 3 or 4 different size perfect fifths in his tuning system on his harpsichord.
Wow.
Some of the perfect
Can we
fifths
play them
were,
all?
oh
Or
well,
are
he
they
used,
different like fifths within the scale range, or he would actually use those three different intervals?
he would have it so that it, the whole problem was that if you wanted to play in different keys, you had to retune your instrument. If I wanted to play in a key that's centered on D and make it all sound beautiful and harmonically true, the technical term is a just, so we have just intonation. Just intervals are harmonically based intervals using low numbers like this 10 on 9, 9 on 8 that we were looking at a minute ago. But if you want to play music that has that purity of intonation, and there's plenty of reasons for doing that, another conversation. If you want to play music with that beautiful tuning, you have to tune the instrument to the one fundamental. So if you're playing in D major, you tune your instrument so it sounds beautiful in D. And then if you want to play in a different key like F major, you have to retune the whole instrument to sound beautiful in F.
Yeah.
Now, before equal temperament came along, there were many attempts to solve this problem all through the Renaissance and Baroque times especially. And Bach's attempt involved setting up the keyboard, which with its full chromatic range, so all the white notes and black notes that we're familiar with on a modern piano, but here we're talking about a harpsichord. He had all his notes there on the keyboard, and the tuning that he used, some of the perfect fifths were a Pythagorean comma bigger than pure. Some of them were 2 Pythagorean commas bigger than pure. Some of them were 1 Pythagorean comma less than pure. Some of them were pure. So he tweaked the size of the fifths by these very small increments that I've just called the Pythagorean comma. We can mathematically define that if you like, but just leave it for now. It's a very tiny adjustment. He tweaked those fifths so that when he was playing on his harpsichord, he had some compromise away from that beautiful tuning in whatever key he played in, but the amount of compromise was slightly different according to what key he was in. But to his ear, it was all acceptable. So he could tune the keyboard that way, and then play in any key. And that's what the Well-Tempered Clavier is all about. He wrote these pieces, preludes and fugues, in every key, starting with C major and then going to C minor, and then next one up, C sharp major, C sharp minor, next one up, D major and D minor. And he went through all 24 keys. They're called the 48 preludes and fugues because he did it twice. He did it once early in his life, and then a couple of decades later, he wrote another set according to the same thematic sort of organization. And so he was playing a keyboard where there were these microtonal adjustments away from pure, but in such a way that none of the compromises were too bad for him, and he wrote his pieces accordingly. In equal temperament, we've rendered every key sounding exactly the same in terms of the intervals within the scales of that key. Whereas back in Bach's time, F major had a flavour. The intervals in it were different from D major. There was a certain subtle thing, but for musicians who practice with their ears for all their waking hours, the trained ear gets to hear those differences and to enjoy them. So anyway, look, that's a very scattered little selective history of certain things about tuning systems.
I want to get a little more rudimentary here and see if I can bring people like caught up, and we'll get your like tone, like step values back on the screen in the end. Well, let's do this. Can you play like that E string, I guess, the low string? So I don't know how this is working with guitar in Australia and a saxophone in California. But maybe if you just play that loud and I'll try to play quiet and we'll just play octaves. And I'm out. But so like my wave that I'm producing, or like the fundamental tone that I'm producing that you're hearing, is traveling twice as fast as the wave that Greg was playing, and that's the idea of what we call an octave. Now you hear the number 8 in that, and it's like, what? I mean, I'll tell you that it's very much related to the second harmonic and to the astrological opposition. It's like, wait, why 8? And I want to show you an interesting thing. Greg, could you like maybe play and sing a fifth, or play a fifth interval? Okay, and so there you're hearing this vibration of 2 against 3. All right, so I'm going to slow that way down for our ears, and it sounds like this. All right, so this hand's doing 3, and this hand's doing 2. And if I was able to speed that up to the point that it just sounded like a buzz, you would actually hear 2 distinct notes.
Yeah, you'd hear the interval.
That same relationship of what Greg just sang and played, and that's right here in the harmonic series. In the second harmonic, right? So the first is the fundamental note or wave, and the second divides that in half, and the pitch is twice as high. And the third divides it in threes, and the pitch is what we call a musical fifth. But the musical fifth really is the relationship between this 3 wave and this 2 wave. And when you have those kinds of little like beats happening, like 3 against 2, it sounds like the musical fifth, which is like at the heart of at least Pythagorean tuning. Maybe we could say Western tuning. I mean, it's like it arrives very early in this harmonic series. It's very close to the fundamental tone. It's the first, in a sense, like unique note introduced when you move through the harmonics, because the second harmonic it's the octave. It's it's like the same note in the next range. And that means it's a different thing. Like there's a relationship between that fundamental or first harmonic wave and the octave wave that's moving twice as fast. But if we call one C or E or G, the octave is also C or E or G, depending on what key you're playing in or what note you're holding. Like, and the same, it's just in the next range. Cool. So fun. So, oh, this is fun.
So I've got a spreadsheet that my friend Robert and I built.
Beautiful.
and I can change the values, essentially change the frequencies of the waves.
Cool.
So in this very first box in the top left-hand corner, that's a sine wave representing the fundamental frequency. And it has a certain, I don't know if you can see my cursor, presumably you can.
We can.
Right, it has a certain frequency. So the length or the wavelength between these peaks is the frequency of the fundamental. Now, if I go into this box here and type in 2, so I've just typed in 2, and below the fundamental, we now have the second harmonic. And you can see the wavelength of this second one is exactly half. So therefore, the frequency is exactly double. Right, so you can see there are 2 peaks in the harmonic for every 1 peak in the fundament. Now, when you add them together, you get the combination waveform. That's the product of the 2, or the sum of the 2 in a sense. That's what we hear when we hear this la, la. We're hearing the interaction of those 2 notes, and so that's the combination. So
Can you show 2 and can you change the boxes to 2 and 3, please?
yeah, 2 and 3. I'm going to leave 1 as 1
1
and
and
change
1
the
and a
second
half.
box to 1.5.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got 3 waves of the harmonic for every 2 cycles of the fundament.
And that's this thing I was snapping.
3 against 2. Yeah, 3 against 2. That's right. And now you can see the combination wave has a very different shape, but it's still very clearly defined. If I put this interval slightly out of tune by going, so first of all, look at the regularity of that combination. This peak here, and this peak here, and this peak here, they're defining a periodicity that's quite strict. You can see the shapes as it goes along, just repeats and repeats and repeats. So it has coherence as a kind of sound. If I put this interval up here slightly out of tune, let's say, I don't know, 1.537 or something. I don't know.
Well, cool.
Look closely at that combination. It does not repeat. In the size of the screen that I've got up there, there's no repeat. If you look closely at it, it's whoopee.
Yeah. And in a sense, this is what equal temperament's doing. But I also, Greg, I feel like that's the conversation for 5 conversations from now.
Fair enough.
Okay. I'm going to stick with this thing for a second and just say that, like, one of the reasons why we have this, like, this sound that will be so familiar to folks. Right, which is this like 7-note scale, or what we call a diatonic scale, right? So do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and you hear do on top. It's in a sense, although it's an approximation, and I think that's an important part to say, it results from this harmonic series. And in a way, kind of first and foremost through this lowest harmonic, which is the 3rd harmonic, that introduces a new note to the scene. So before I even go there, let's just talk about keeping the same note. So octaves, right? You can just half and half and half and half and double and double and double and double until the cows come home, right? So I guess, Greg, could you just play a series of octaves like until you can't on that instrument? Cool. And so we get 5, right? And so I guess so the first one, like, so we have this fundamental wave. The next octave is traveling twice as fast. And then it's just like you take a half, or let's talk astrology, opposition, and you cut that in half, and now you have squares, or we went from what's called the 2nd harmonic to the 4th, and you cut the 4s in half, right? This is us cutting a pizza or whatever, and now you have 8s, right? 16, 32, 64, 128, 512. These numbers that we know too well because of like binary code and, gigabytes on your hard drives or whatever these days. But it really is this beautiful, I compare it to cell mitosis, right? Like you were once a single cell, and then the one became two, which became four, which became eight, which became 16. Like it doesn't only skip odd numbers, right? But it skips anything that's not a double. And
Mm.
when you just take a frequency and double it and double it and double it and double it and double it, like if you were in the key of like Greg was just playing E, you go from like an E to the next E to the next E to the next E to the next E, like that. And I mean, you
There's
can
no new
continue to
notes.
do
That's
that
it. It's
until
all
you're
they're all E's, and they all have an octave relationship, but you can transpose them back down, and they clearly are E's. Even the ones that we can't hear, you can transpose them back down, and we would hear them as E's.
put into a place you can hear, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so when you play the three wave, and in a second, it's like the interaction of the third and this in the second, right? They're just next to each other. Then you play what we call the musical fifth, which Greg, I'm going to ask you to use your voice because mine is not polished or the instrument, but could you do re mi fa so for us?
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Do.
Can you get up to the next
Started on a
note?
different note. Let me do that again, starting on this note. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
And so you'll hear Greg singing do on the bottom and do on the top. That's this octave. In a sense, it's the same note, but separated in these two ranges. The top one was traveling twice as fast as the bottom one, or has half the wavelength, right? Um, can you sing up to the 12th? I certainly can.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol.
Nice. I mean, I can kind of
Do,
hear.
sol.
So I'm gonna play some harmonics on the horn. Like the horn, it's an interesting thing, and I don't understand. And Greg, this is another question I had for you, which is how in the heavens am I actually doing this? But first of all, the horn is designed in such a way that as you start closing down these pads, the length of the horn that's vibrating is lengthened, right? So as my horn is just like fully open, I mean, I can even open some of this stuff up here, and then air is coming through here, and I'm playing like this short length of instrument, right? But as things start closing down, you'll just hear it's going to get lower because what's happening is the tube is getting longer, the air column's getting longer. So and that's like the lowest note that this horn is designed to play. I could put my knee in the bell and get a little lower, or I could like do some things in here and like bend it down. But like that's like the whole thing going for it, right? And the octave, so like there I'm playing up here, the air's coming here. It's like literally half as much horn as when the whole thing's happening. But like a really cool thing that happens in, I mean, it can happen in all instruments, but in the saxophone, like I can manipulate my like tongue shape and my larynx, and I don't know. I just consider it like making things funny, and somehow I'm able to cut out the fundamental vibration, which is the whole horn, and just you'll hear the sound of the second harmonic, which is that octave. What I did there by accident was to go to the third harmonic, which is this musical fifth, right? So that's, but it's actually from there. It's like the relationship between is the relationship of the third harmonic and the first harmonic. But what we hear as a musical fifth is the relationship between the third harmonic and the second harmonic. It's like this third harmonic where we first introduce a new note, if you will, onto the scene, because it's not a halving. It's not a halving doubling, right?
The saxophone, of course, is shaped like a cone. right? It's starts off skinny and it gets wider and wider and wider all the way down. Whereas the clarinet starts off as a cylinder and stays as a cylinder right until this bottom end here, you know. So that different shape causes some harmonics of the saxophone to be kind of reinforced and others to be dampened. And so it is in the clarinet, but in a different way because of the different shape. So that, you'll have to look at these 6 fingers I've got on the front here, on the 6 open holes of the instrument. There's 1, 2, there's one there without a key, but it's a hole. And then 1, 2, 3. So if I'm playing this in the fundamental register, and then without changing those fingers, I can use my embouchure and my diaphragm to adjust it. But it's much easier to get that adjustment by using this clever little key on the back. Saxophones have one too. The saxophonists tend to call it the octave key, but clarinetists call it the register key, because on the saxophone it makes the saxophone jump up an octave. But on the clarinet it jumps up a 12th, which is the interval that Brett was just talking about, from that la, la, up to that one, the third harmonic. So, and that's me just adding that key there to change it. Then, if I lift that finger, it's effectively as if I've applied another register key. I'm going to do the 3 of them in a row. I'm going to do the fundament, then I'm going to add the thumb key, and then I'm going to lift that. And when I lift that, we're going to hear the 5th harmonic of the fundament. We'll hear the first harmonic, which is the fundament, and anything multiplied by 1 remains unchanged. So fundament, 3rd harmonic, and 5th harmonic, all with the same, essentially the same fingering, the same length of the column of air. And I can change my fundamental note. I'm now playing and so that's how the different registers of the instrument are opened up to the player. The clarinet has a pretty functional range for about 3.5 octaves, whereas the saxophone, until you get into playing lots of harmonics, which is a kind of advanced technique, you're really stuck with 2.5 octaves.
Yeah.
So the clarinet...
Is that a technique that most clarinetists learn, where you're lifting that top finger?
Yeah. That's the correct notes. As soon as you go, you can get up. You've got the fundamental register, then you've got the clarion register, which is all playing in the 3rd harmonic. And when you get to the top of that and you run out of notes, you have to go into the 5th harmonic to get any higher by lifting that finger.
And you're building a major triad, right? So
you are.
Trying to get there in a different way. I'll ask though, Greg, can you do that same thing without using the thumb or lifting your finger?
You can, but it's going to be a bit more hit and miss, and there might be a few strange squeaky sounds.
Yeah, be careful, y'all.
Wow, I'm not sure what that must have been a really flat 8th harmonic, I reckon.
Really cool multiphonic space as well. Yeah, do you have
look on the saxophone's got that bigger. The saxophone, the air just rushes. It offers a lot less resistance because it's a cone. The air can escape into the wider section further down way more easily. So there's a lot less resistance than on the clarinet, and that means that, like, when you're playing any of these wind instruments, the column of air that's vibrating up and down in the instrument, it's going back and forth really rapidly, compressing and stretching and compressing and stretching and compressing really rapidly. That column of air continues down through your throat and into your lungs and into your chest. So if you change the shape here in your throat, you're going to change the tone color you get out of the instrument, because really there's a continuity. The column of air is going right down there. You try and get someone to feel your chest while you're playing the saxophone. They can feel the note in your lungs, you know. So
in a sense, like when I'm just changing this to like cut out the fundamental or the first harmonic, and then I can hear the second like pop out, or the third, like I'm basically limiting the air, like the roots of the tree, if you will, to a certain point, and then you hear like a different, I don't know, trunk. That's the wrong metaphor. But like if the horn's this long, or if I'm playing a note this long and it's going that long into my body, if I limit it like how deep it's going into my body, then it's going to limit how far it's going down the horn too, right? So like in a sense, yeah, I'm starting to
well, it's
understand more,
balanced.
like
It's a
physically.
balancing act. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
balancing act there. Have you done much work just on your mouthpiece, getting control of without the neck on, just the reed and mouthpiece, where you can
Yeah,
play
well,
a
not
tune on that?
harmonically. I mean, but like bending and playing scales and stuff on my mouthpiece. Yeah.
Using your throat to do the bending. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Because then you're working with such a short column of air here,
Yeah.
it's easier to interact with it.
Yeah. But can you play harmonics on the mouthpiece?
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can.
This might be particularly hairy, friends. Prepare yourself.
This is
Yeah, I haven't tried playing a harmonic here. Everyone, like seriously, brace yourself.
yeah.
What interval is that, Craig?
That's the fourth.
Huh. Which wouldn't be in the series, right?
Well, it would be if your fundament was 3 octaves lower than the higher note. It'd
Yeah.
be the eighth harmonic over the sixth harmonic.
Uh-huh. But I imagine this is my fundamental.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That feels like I'm just like pinching, bending.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel like I'm getting a harmonic out of it. I hope somebody just came onto YouTube right now and they're like, what the what are these dudes doing? Yeah, saxophones. They're amazing devices.
Look,
That's a
I picked
beautiful.
this.
Is it Con?
No, it's a Busha, an early
Oh,
30s, early
nice.
30s Busha. Yeah. It's called the New Aristocrat. I'm lucky enough to get it recently.
Right on. It's an American horn.
It is.
Elkhart, Indiana, y'all.
Elkhart, Indiana. It's-
That's beautiful. That's new for you, huh?
yeah. I got it beginning of this year. I got it. It needed a little bit of work, but I've had that done by someone, and it's now just purring along. It's got a really it's the right tone color for playing 30s jazz. Really, it's a lovely,
Nice. Is it
warm,
silver or
rich.
nickel?
Just silver plate. Yeah, would have been silver plate, but
Cool.
it's well tarnished.
What year is it?
1933, 1934. It's actually a transition model. They came out with the Aristocrat in the
The Aristocrat.
late 30s. And before that, they had the True Tone, which was a model that ran from about 1900 through to the early 30s. And then in the Great Depression, and the sales all fell off, and they had to lay off half their workers, but they kept the good ones, kept the good ones. And then in the early 30s, they were designing a new model, which became eventually the Aristocrat. This is the transition model called the New Aristocrat,
Hmm.
which they only made about 2,500 of in the early 30s. So a bit rare. The intonation and ease of playing is just gorgeous. So it's really, really well made. It's lovely.
Nice.
Mm.
So well, there's this thing that happens musically where, and I use language like this in my astrology a lot, where like, so I can go to the fifth of this key, and you just hear that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And that's this 3 against 2. It's not really, because that would bring me up into, an astrologer should love this number, the 12th note of the scale, right? It's the fifth above the octave. But if I tame that thing, if I bring that within an octave space, right, I'm hearing this, what we call the musical fifth. And then that note also has its own fifth. And that note has a fifth. And that note has a fifth. And if I bring all those fifths inside the same range of an octave, right? Like you actually, it's beautiful. What happens is it takes, this is another wonderful astro number, 7 octaves of space to go through what we call the circle of fifths, so that each of the 12 notes in a, well, and at least in kind of a Western harmony octave, I'll say a little thing more about that. Like you get to all of them. So the fifth of the key of C is G, C, D, E, F, G, G, F sharp, G,
G, A, B,
A,
C,
B,
D.
C, D, D, E, F sharp, G, A, right?
A.
So like the fifth of A is E, the fifth of E is B, the fifth of E is F sharp, like that. Now it doesn't work out so like naturally mathematically, um, and this brings in things like Pythagorean commas and places that I think a little bit more advanced than I want to get today. But basically, this like 12 note scale, and this might be a support for 12 sign octave or 12 sign wave in astrology. It really does result from nature. And then there's a bit of a human, well, there's more than a bit, but there's a bit of a human magic trick, like an approximation thing that's happening to try to like tame this animal, which is not so even as Greg was describing earlier, to get to equal temperament. But like in like the Pythagorean thing, right? He gets to this third harmonic, which introduces this new note. If you're in the key of C, it's like, oh, now there's a G. And the most consonant or easy to listen to interval or relationship between two notes is the octave, right? And that's just, as Greg was showing in that 2 and 1 wave, right? And they just kind of add towards one another very easily. And then like the next most kind of agreeable sound and polyrhythm is this 3/2. And you can go the fifth of 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 the fifth and kind of get back not to where you started, but to an octave or a division, right? In halves and halves and halves and halves of the original note, right? And in this way, we build the 12 tones that Western harmony uses to kind of describe an octave. And this is one thing that I was really excited to speak about with you today, Greg, because as I'm taking this to harmonic astrology, I'll let you share what you want to share with the waves up, and then I'll go back there.
Look, I was just trying to illustrate what you were talking about. That there's the octave combination, and you can see how rapidly it repeats its pattern. The pattern has 2 peaks, 2 troughs that repeat and repeat and repeat. That's a very consonant interval. It's a very harmonious interval. It's we can measure how much tension there is in an interval by how easily that pattern forms and how regularly that pattern forms. That's the octave pattern. And if we go to the third harmonic pattern, just like that.
Whoa, cool.
Quite different in its shape, very different sound. It's a new note. There's something going on there. It's a very different combination pattern. If I go back to a double octave, so now I'm going to take it to the octave of the octave.
Could you do 27 for me?
27, the
Uh-huh.
27th harmonic.
Yeah. Which is where you first get the major sixth. Wow.
Oh, hang on a
I
minute,
mean,
major.
some of this is because the resolution now it's like, right, like we
Yes,
really have to
yeah.
zoom in to kind of see the shape, but it's pretty cool to see that.
Wh-
Like,
When you say major sixth, I'm a little bit perplexed by the 27 connection there, Brett.
the 27th harmonic gives you the sixth scale tone, diatonic scale tone. It's the first time it's introduced, and it's pretty dang far from equal temperament.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Um, but yeah, and so this is a thing. Let me share my screen here. This
It,
is a
no,
thing I've been
yeah, okay,
wondering
sure.
about. And actually, I
Normally the,
feel like maybe before I go here, let me just do like a harmonic chart.
because the
And
major
actually,
sixth, the
I'll
major
do a
sixth
chart
comes up with five
example.
on three. Like the interval
So
of 5 on 3 is a major sixth in just intonation.
right, but I guess I'm look well.
Mm,
Yeah. Well, so let me go back there. I'm gonna bring this into charts for folks. My chart might
sure,
not be the best example of this. Do you have a T-square in your chart, Greg?
I do. I've got two.
Do you mind if I put your chart on the screen?
Go for it.
Cool. I pulled it up earlier. Okay, and then let me go a little more traditional here. All right, so like Jupiter, no, not Neptune, Jupiter, Venus, and Pluto in a T square. Where else am I? Guess Saturn, Neptune, Mars.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it looks like maybe the let's do the Pluto, Jupiter, Venus one. Okay,
sure.
so I mean, obviously this circle has a circumference of 360 degrees. A weird thing about harmonic charts is they don't. They totally break. They anger the math teacher in me, because
Fold, fold the chart onto
yeah, and
us.
I mean, I made some beautiful illustrations of this before, and I'm not going to do that here, but I'm creating like a huge kind of ebook around this stuff. But
Cool.
basically, like the second harmonic, it takes like if you consider the zodiac a wave, and first of all, I'll just say like astronomically, we should like if this is the Earth's equator, um, then the ecliptic, or the path of the sun, and for the most part the planet's the heart of the zodiac, it snakes above and below the equator. And I'll say let's go north and south of the equator to be fair, especially since we're connecting the two hemispheres here in this conversation, right? This is zero tropical Aries. The northern peak is Cancer. Libra is where we cross to the southern. Capricorn is the south point. Aries, Cancer. So, like, literally, Earth's North Pole. Shocked I don't have a globe within reach. That's rare. But like the North Pole of Earth is leaning in every moment forever towards 0 degrees tropical Cancer on the ecliptic, which is directly above Earth's Tropic of Cancer. People say the tropical zodiac's not astronomical, and they are fools. It's like
It's very
absolutely the most
astronomical.
astronomical. Like I'm sick of like candy coating that one. It's just like you have not learned astronomy if you think the tropical zodiac is not astronomical. It's indeed the most astronomical, or at least Earth astronomical of them all. It's Earth's.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
It's
geocentric, but it's deeply astronomical.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's like fully a wave, right? So if we think of that as a wave, now for it to be a wave, like there has to be something moving from one point to the other, and so like the moon every 27.3 days would kind of travel that wave, and now you get like number in space and time, which we call astronomy. Anyway, so every wave should also be vibrating at every whole number division of that wave, right? So what a second harmonic does is we take the wheel and we cut it in half. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to open up a bunch of slides, but we don't want to be here forever. So basically, there is a full zodiac from 0 Aries to 0 Libra, and there's a full zodiac from 0 Libra to 0 Aries. And it divides the wheel in half, and it divides each of the signs in half, right? So, for example, like where's a good example for Greg? The part of fortune here, which is in the second half of the sign of Aries, as you can see, is going to be in the Taurus slice of Aries when we look at this in the second harmonic division, right? In Vedic astrology, they call this division the horas for hours. It's actually a Greek word, right, of the day hours and the night hours, and we divide signs in half. So if I look at a second harmonic chart for Greg, we're going to see that part of fortune in second harmonic Taurus. I guess we're not because they're no, this is just the fifth harmonic. It's like, what happened there?
Yeah.
Happened there is the software didn't listen to me say two. Okay. Right. So there's fortune now in Taurus. Anyway, in dividing the half and like putting the two halves, you like superimpose them. Oppositions become conjunctions. It's a super weird thing where, in a sense, this is like a 180-degree circle, or really the 360 degrees of the zodiac. It's just going around this thing twice.
Hmm.
And so when you look like Greg has Jupiter and Pluto in opposition, now in the second harmonic, they're conjoined. And if you'll remember from Greg's nativity, let me show it to you. Greg was born with not only Jupiter and Pluto in opposition, but Venus is somewhere near their midpoint, right? So square, Venus square Jupiter, Venus square Pluto. The squares in a second harmonic chart are going to be oppositions. So you see Jupiter, Pluto conjunct with Venus opposite. If we get into a fourth harmonic chart, which is basically a circumference of 90 degrees, those squares are going to become conjunctions. It also will magnify this thing 4 times. So an orb like this, where you see Venus and Jupiter are 2 degrees out of orb of a perfect square, when you magnify that 2 degrees by 4, it's going to become 8 degrees. Venus and Pluto, they're out by 4 degrees almost, so that's going to become like 16. So when I go to a fourth harmonic chart, it'll bring, for Greg, these T squares into like a triple conjunction or a stellium, but it's a little bit harder to see. If they were exact squares, then this would be a triple conjunction in the fourth harmonic chart.
And look, we're now talking about the need to kind of adjust the orbs in the same way that one has to adjust the amplitude of harmonics in sound on a musical instrument, because those amplitudes are diminishing the higher up the harmonics you go. And this is kind of related to it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and like the harmonic orb theory, which is maybe also a conversation for another time, but it's really intriguing because, well, basically you'll choose like a number X for a conjunction, right? So some, like David Cochran in his vibrational astrology work suggests 16 degrees for a conjunction. And so this Venus Pluto here, which, most of us looking at an astrology chart, like we're not thinking that Venus and Pluto are conjoined here. But if you offer 16 degrees, I'm not quite there, right? 16 is going to take me to like 105, right? I mean, obviously Jupiter and Pluto are there, and then Jupiter and Venus, they're only 9 degrees apart, right? There's
the others are inside 16. It's only 15.
Oh,
inside
I did
16.
bad math. My bad. Sorry. Right. So that if they're within 15 and I'm in a fourth harmonic chart,
Yep.
then I mean basically if you have 16 as your X or 16 for conjunction, then you do half of that for an opposition, so 8 if 16 is the conjunction, and the square is 4. So anything, and I should have known better when I did bad math over there, but anything within 4 degrees of a square, like Venus and Pluto are here, are going to be within 16 degrees of a conjunction in the fourth harmonic chart. Anyway, like once you get like, as you saw, like in the second harmonic, Jupiter and Pluto come together. So would, any opposition. Yeah. Like the nodes, you probably noticed this, but in an even number harmonic chart, the nodes are conjunct. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Because again, this is like 90 degrees if it's a fourth harmonic chart. And the nodes are always opposite. Well, 90 and 180, 180 is a conjunction. It's like really weird stuff to start getting into harmonic charts, and this isn't the place to start with it. But an example I'd love to show is...
I was going to say, quickly put up my fifth harmonic chart.
Cool. Well, I wanted to go there, but I want to show nines real quick. Sure. So look at Greg has like a very strong nines, which does not surprise me in any way. They're like for me a very kind of spiritual essence. So, for example, Mars in the South Node have a very strong quad novile. All right, so for those of you who haven't heard that term, it's like, what the heck is that? Or look at Mercury, Venus novile, Sun, Jupiter novile, Moon, Saturn novile. Well, the novile is a ninth of a circle. Divide the 360 degrees by 9, 40 degrees. Okay, so you can see here like Venus and who's it?
Venus and Mercury.
And Mercury, right? So just think from Venus, a sign, 30 degrees would take me to 15, 35, 15 and a half Capricorn. And now I'm going another 10 degrees to get to Mercury, right? So 40, right? And so in a ninth harmonic chart, all those things would become conjunctions. But I want to go to a third harmonic chart. So dig like Greg has this strong, Moon, Uranus trine.
Yep.
Right, a third of the circle, or a super strong Mercury ascendant trine, which also makes a ton of sense, right? Jupiter, Neptune trine, okay? So when I go to a third harmonic chart, and I'm just going to change my aspect set here, and I want y'all to keep in mind also that 9 we saw between Venus and Mercury, for an example. When we go to a third harmonic, we're going to see the trines like Mercury ascendant become a conjunction. Right, so there's that Mercury ascendant thing. But notice now that you get Mercury trine Venus in the third harmonic, right? Well, a trine is a 3. And a 3 inside the world of 3, okay, is 9. So if you have a trine between planets or a planet and a point in a third harmonic chart, there's the Moon Uranus trine in Greg's nativity, right? Becomes a conjunction here. He had Jupiter Neptune trine, they become a conjunction. But look at like Mars South Node trine in the third chart. Venus Mercury trine in the third chart.
And because the aspect in the first chart was exact, it's still exact even the harmonic chart as well. That
right,
Mars.
yeah, because that magnifying glass of increasing orb, like, multiply 0 times 1,000 and you have 0, right? But an important thing, like Rick Levine calls the nines noviles trines on steroids, because the idea is, it's in a sense, it's like a trine of a trine. Let me cast your fifth harmonic as you had invited.
And in the same way, like on the guitar, the third harmonic note, the node there that divides that string, that's a third of the string. It's also a node for the ninth harmonic. But it's going to be overwhelmed by the third harmonic, because the third harmonic is I'm isolating it and making it strong. But also that's 3 ninths. So there'd be another ninth and another ninth and a ninth and a ninth and a ninth. Yeah.
Are you able to play the ninth harmonic on that string?
Maybe.
Hard to find one ninth.
There it is.
Cool. Could you do instead, Greg, could you play the third harmonic and then the sixth, please?
Sure, yeah. That'll come out sounding like an octave, of course. Sorry, went to the fifth harmonic instead, my fault.
Yeah.
Because 6 is double 3.
Yeah. So this is a really important thing. Remember, we were saying before that, you take the root wave, you cut it in half, and you have the octave. And half of a 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 half, and you just go octaves all the way to space, And so importantly, like once you get, as we said before, like the third harmonic is in a sense the first one that introduces a new note, if you will. Like, so if you're playing the key of C, second harmonic is the next C. The fourth harmonic, the next C. Eighth, the next C. 16th, the next C. Okay? And you'll notice that's not just even numbers, right? It's the doubling numbers. I like to say the mitosis numbers, right? 2, 4,
3, 6, 12, 24, so on, yeah.
Right. But if you're in the third harmonic, right? So the sixth harmonic is twice three. So it's the octave of the third harmonic. If you're in the key of C, the third, which always brings the musical fifth, would be the note G. And then the sixth harmonic is going to be the G an octave above that, right? And you can go
And
through
so,
6, 12, 24, 48, etc.
we as astrologers, we often, group these aspects into families. So the sextile and the trine are seem to be more closely related to each other than a sextile and a square is, because the square's in the 2, 4, 8 series and the sextile's in the 3, 6, 12 series.
And
Um,
you astrologers will typically learn them, right, as the hard aspects or opposition, square, even conjunction. That's like first, second, fourth harmonic, the semi-square, the octile, 16th or 8th, the 16th. That's kind of at the backbone of Uranian astrology. They're just like the half of the half of the half of the half. Whereas we typically learn sextiles and trines as like more flowing, or the old term would be benefic aspects, yeah, easy aspects. Um, so this is a really important thing about the nine. While you do see nines as a trine in a third harmonic chart, they have a very different flavor. Like they would introduce a different note. It's not like the sixth, which is the octave of the third harmonic. It's a new thing,
mhm.
right? And what I'm tripping on, I'm sure, Greg, you've seen the lambda tetractus, yeah? um, like that 27 thing, right? So, and this is where it sounds like you're going to be able to offer a new perspective for me. We can come back to your fifth harmonic chart. Um, but when I'm looking at like the harmonic series, as far as like interval building, and I think tale for another time, but y'all, these like +2, -14, +2, -31, these are showing us like how out of tune the equal temperament approximation or equal division of a scale is from the actual natural harmonic, or like equal integer division of a wave.
Yeah,
And some of them, interestingly, are more out than others. Like the fifth harmonic, which brings the musical third, is more so than the third harmonic, which brings the musical fifth. The seventh is pretty way out, which actually is like kind of so are seventh harmonics and septiles astrology. Um, but an interesting thing for me, Greg, is this like, and maybe this is where I get corrected, because I need to be looking at relationships between, like as you were saying, like I don't need to go all the way to A from C to experience a musical sixth, right? Like I can get that sixth in other places between different scale tones, right? But if I'm based in C alone, what I was just noticing here is like, so the ninth gives me, and this is, you'll remember maybe that Greg had showed us a whole step. And so like do re, like C, D, if I'm in the key of C, is 9, 8, right? Because 8 is one of our doubling numbers, right? So you see harmonic here, octaves, it's like 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. It could go on 32, 64, all the halving doublings, right? Well, once I get up to 8, which is going to be the octave above the octave above the octave of the fundamental, then the ninth harmonic in that ratio or beat of like 9 against 8 brings in this whole step. It's
yeah,
one way to do a whole step. It's like not that far out from the way most of us are hearing music, because we've all been like born into this equal temperament thing.
yeah.
But it's not the only way to do a whole step, as Greg was showing you in that diagram. Maybe we can look back to that in a second. But yeah, I was looking here because I was just wondering like, all right, well, how far like down the harmonic series do I need to go to get all 12 chromatic tones within an octave? Like if I wanted to equal temperament or attempt to like hear 12 tones in an octave. And it looked to me like the first time I get to A is at the 27th harmonic.
Yeah, look, that might be the closest approximation to equal temperament, like if you go to the 20, but really if you just do a 5-on-3 over C, that gives you a beautiful sounding pure A.
So so let me
The
just see that here. So five, so like I'm
I,
basically playing the E and the
See, I don't
G.
know. I've lost your share. I'm not sure why. Have I
Let me just
closed?
stop
Oh,
and
there
then
we
we can
go.
just do it again. But like so what I'm hearing there is right like and so this is fun like Kepler started playing with quintiles. And it's like, why divide this thing only in halves and thirds and fourths? By the way, he was against the seven and the nine. There's like the seven, you can't draw a regular 7-point star ever. It's impossible. It's one of the great beauties of the seven, actually. And it's actually really difficult to make a 9-pointed star, even though you can divide the wheel equally in nines, unlike seven, where you cannot. Um, but he was into the fives, and he says, all right, and the fifth harmonic is like the musical third. And trying to teach that to people who don't speak music, it's like, what are you talking about? But it's because the fifth harmonic brings this third scale tone. And it was cool that one of the many things I've learned already here today, Greg, is like how the clarinet like does that, right? Like how you're kind of going instead of an octave,
Fifth,
second
third, yeah.
harmonic, the fifth and then the third, or the third harmonic and then the fifth harmonic, which is how we build what's called a major triad. And so what I'm hearing from you is like, yeah, you don't have to go all the way to the 27th harmonic, which you're not going to be able to hear anyway. Right? That's like
Yeah,
way up there. You can just take that the fifth harmonic gives you the third harmonic gives you the fifth. And if you look at the relationship between those two notes, like in the key of C, that's E and G, and E and G is a minor third, but G and E is this major six. So that's what you're saying is
yeah,
5/3 to get to the six, yeah?
yeah, yeah. Look, if that a really interesting way of considering it, and again, it relies on a little bit of musical insight, but in a major key, you've got three major chords. C major, if you're in the key of C, you've got C major is chord 1 and F major is chord 4, built on the fourth note of the scale, and G major is chord 5, built on the fifth note of the scale. Now, if you're in just intonation, you want to make sure that your notes are tuned so that that major chord on C and on F and on G, those major chords on those three notes, want to all have beautifully pure major thirds. And so if you take a C and you go up 4-on-3 to get your F, and then from the F you go up 5-on-4, what's that maths? 4-on-3 times 5-on-4.
Right, and you multiply, which is a thing I need to learn
Yeah,
why
so
that
four
is
on three, four on
mathematically,
three
but
times 5-on-4 is 20-on-12.
right, which reduces,
5-on-3.
yeah.
It's a pure major sixth. Um, and likewise, if you wanting to tune the B, the seventh note of the scale, if you go up from the C by 3-on-2, that will give you the G, the fifth note, and then the 3-on-2 multiplied by 5-on-4, it's 15-on-8.
Right, which is another,
It's another pure major third from the B down to the G. And that's where that diagram I did have of the scale. It turns out that with just intonation, you can actually produce all of the modes. Now I know I'm going a bit technical again, but the Locrian mode, the Lydian mode, the Dorian mode, all of those modes come out pretty nicely in just intonation.
but are the notes, so like let's say I'm playing in the key of C, is the E in my Lydian mode the same frequency as the E in my Dorian mode? Or are they kind of slightly different animals?
Well, if the the question as you've put it, you would have to be changing the fundament, because for E to be, if your Dorian mode's rooted on C, then E doesn't happen in the Dorian mode on C. E flat happens. So think of it. I'll zoom out on this table here.
Oh, I guess I meant the Dorian mode, like let's just say like white keys on the piano, so I'm playing like a D Dorian, so D to D. And
Oh,
I guess
okay.
piano's a bad example because it's a fixed instrument.
Yeah, and you're moving the fundament every time you do that, because if you're
Right.
playing the Dorian on D,
Yeah.
D is your fundament. But if you then play the Lydian on F, F's now your fundament.
Yeah.
So everything's changed. You really have to compare the modes, as I've done in this diagram here. I've now zoomed out so you can see the whole
You gotta
thing.
share your. Oh, here it comes. Um, so this is like what you're saying before. An equal temperament, it's kind of like E's and E's and E's and E,
Yep,
right?
yep,
But in actual nature and
yep.
other true kind of tuning systems, be it Pythagorean, just whatever it may be, like E is going to be a different animal when F is your fundament versus when C or B flat's your fundament or anything else.
Yeah, so if I just sort of rephrase your question, you can see the G in the Dorian mode is the same G as the G in the Phrygian mode if both those modes start on D.
Okay, well, I want to. Will you show me where to look?
Sure. Okay. So oh, this column here,
Yeah.
that's the G, which is 4 on 3 above the D at the beginning. So here's the D at the beginning: D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. There's your Dorian mode starting on D. And the G in that mode has a 4 on 3 relationship with the fundament. In the Phrygian mode, the G is the same. It's still a 4 on 3 against the fundament.
Hmm.
In the Lydian mode, we don't have a G, we have a G sharp, which is why
Right.
it's different. 64/45. That's a 64/45. I wonder if I can make this a bit bigger for you.
I'm seeing that well enough,
Okay, good.
but
If you've got a high
bigger
res
wouldn't
monitor.
hurt. It's kind of nice to be able to see all of it, though.
So the color coding is to do with the ratios. Up the top here, we've got the key to the color coding. The pink requires only powers of 2. The kind of aqua pale green ratios require powers of 2 and 3. And then the more solid blue ones require either 2 and 5 or 3 and 5 or 2 and 3 and 5.
Yeah, so I mean, interesting. They're all Fibonacci numbers, right? They're all
Yep,
vesica numbers, 2, 3, and
yep.
5.
Well, the piano is so Fibonacci. You've got
Hmm.
13 notes in a chromatic scale if you include the upper octave. You've got 5
Yeah.
black notes, 8 white notes.
Yeah, I mean, it's also so astro, right? Where we have 12 halftones in an octave, but 7 scale tones, or right? Like it's a pretty amazing thing to see. Yeah, and it's just
Mm,
interesting around two, threes, and fives, and then just cool to see like the different types of whole steps, right? Like 9/8
mm,
versus 10/9s.
mm.
Yeah, versus what else do we have? Let me see other whole steps.
They're the only whole step
9/8
sizes.
and 10/9. Cool.
Yep.
And then how close
Um,
are those numbers? So if I like 8/9 is
uh,
0.888.
can we do it the other way so they're all more than one? 9/8.
Yeah, I don't know. It's easier for me to see 0.88 versus zero point 0.9,
Okay,
you
righto.
know? But if I go 9/8, 1.125,
Yeah,
and 10/9 is
1.1 repeater.
1.1111.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, they seem super close. My ears aren't so great that I wonder if I'd even hear it personally, like working on
You,
that.
if you put them side by side, you definitely hear it. And interestingly, even though they're both rational numbers, there's a kind of, I don't know, I'd call the 9/8. Yeah, I'm not sure. See, the 9/8, I think, is closer to the equal temperament whole tone than the 10/9 is.
Which is what root 12
The
over
12,
2?
12th root of 2 all squared
I don't know if I can 12. Oh, I guess I can 12th root of 2.
on a calculator you can. It
Yeah, I have a
seems.
calculator up here. It's pretty basic. So 12th root of 2, 1.0594. And then what do I do to that?
Square it.
Square it. Okay, let me add that to my memory.
1.122.
And then where's my squared button? Yeah, 1.122. And then the 9 over 8 is 1.125. Yeah, I mean, it also feels more settled than 1.111111111. Right?
It
Like,
does, and yet they're both rational. It's
yeah.
just that 10 on 9, 10 is a bigger number than 9. So we've had to use higher numbers to express the 10 on 9 than we had to when we expressed the 9 on 8.
Well, and then the other piece of it, when I do 9 on 8, I'm working with 8, which is an octave,
Yeah,
right? Because 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, like all my mitosis numbers.
yeah.
Whereas when we do 10 on 9, there isn't an octave of fundamental tone involved.
hmm I'm just going to tune this guitar using an electronic tuner, and then I'm going to show you and anyone else who's watching. You'll be able to hear the difference between tunings.
And by the way, anyone who's watching this still at this point, you are hardcore. And reach out because you're our people. It's we've been more in the music than the astrology today, but it's rare to find folks who can speak both of these languages. I'm certainly, as you can tell, not nearly as fluent in the musical language as Craig is. Probably the astrological languages for that matter as well. But
I think
like
we
if you
complement each
do
other.
like love music nerd and astro nerd, please holler because let's hang out. And yeah, anyone who doesn't speak music that's made it far in this thing, like I celebrate you for deciding to torture your brain every now and then. It's not the worst thing for us.
So I'll just stop that share there. So I've just tuned my guitar using a electronic tuner, which has put it into equal temperament tuning, which is going to map up with the frets because the frets are laid out according to equal temperament, where every semitone is multiplying the frequency by the 12th root of 2. There's the 12th root of 2 squared and so on. So if I play some chords, they'll all sound pretty in tune. We're kind of used to this tuning. Now that's all in the key of E, but because we've got this amazing thing called equal temperament, I can change keys. So whatever key I play in, it's going to sound in tune. E flat, I'm not a jazz guitarist, so I can't really play in the key of E flat nicely, but
The capo.
every key is going to sound in tune in an acceptable way for most of us. So now I'm going to tune the guitar using a fundament of E, and I'm going to use my ear to tune, and I'm going to do just intonation on the guitar. And I'm going to use harmonics to tune as well.
And the tuner will actually say you're out of tune because it's stuck in equal temperament, right?
I've unplugged it. It will say I'm out of tune. And we hear that as a pretty sweet in tune C major chord. Sorry, E major chord. I'll play a C chord.
Flat.
Horribly out of tune. I'll play a G chord. Someone tune their guitar, please, you know.
Because but if you tuned in G, then the G is going to sound in tune, and the others are
Sweet,
going to sound out
sweet.
of tune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this demonstration, it kind of for full disclosure, I should say the frets are making it even worse, because the frets are expecting 12-note equal temperament. And so if I play a chord with a lot of frets in it, like so I've got 3 fretted notes in the C chord, and they're kind of, it's just disgusting. But go back to the E chord. Oh, beautifully in tune. The biggest difference, you had it up before on the Wikipedia page, that major third that's 14% of a semitone away from where it should be. That's why I spent a fair bit of time tuning that note.
So I mean, like the thirds that we hear, or like that we hear in equal temperament music, which is 99% of the music that people are hearing today, unless they're consciously trying to do something about that. The thirds are like not actual thirds. They're like not.
They're quite out. They're quite strident. If you play a third by itself on the piano, I just hate the sound of it. You've got to put other notes with it to make it kind of sound
like
okay.
an augmented chord, which is a major third and a major third. They just never sound good or settled to me in just intonation. In just intonation, like a third is a right third, right?
Pure 5-on-4, yeah.
Right. And so, like an augmented chord in just intonation, does it sound beautiful? I can't imagine it sounds
You'd have to. Let me just look at that for a sec. I need a mode with a -6th on it, so that one there. Like from the C up to the G sharp in just intonation would be a pure 8-on-5. So it did sound fine by itself. The major third, the E would be a 5-on-4. So the question is,
what's 5 divided
8-on-5 divided by 5-on-4?
And you actually divide 8 by 5 and 5 by 4 to do that, right? It's like 8 divided by 5 over 5 divided by 4.
Yes. So 8 over 5 is 1.6, and then divided by 1.125.
Was it 1.125?
Oh, 1.25. Yep, yeah, 1.25. Okay, it equals 1.28. So that interval, the upper major third, I'll have to play it to see what it sounds like later.
Yeah.
In my digital audio workstation, I've got some tuning settings that I can just change the tuning automatically with and hear. But yeah, the 2 major thirds are not the same size in just intonation if you stack them according to an augmented triad. So you'd be going up a real 5-on-4 and then a rather stretched 5-on-4.
Yeah.
The point I wanted to
thirds all the way, like you're not going to succeed. Like if you really just wanted to fix like some kind of perfect ratio for your thirds, which is 5-on-4, and you did that, like you don't get back to an octave, right?
No, you get 5-on-4 cubed is 125 on 64,
yeah,
which is well short of an octave, because an octave would be 128 on 64. And there you see the way that equal temperament has stretched the thirds so that 3 of them do add up to an octave.
I mean, when I look at a calculator and it's like 1.953, I'm like, yeah, it's like close enough. That's not how it works, right?
Look, the reason that we have 12-note equal temperament, you didn't explicitly point to it before, but it was again on that sheet. You pointed out that the perfect fifths are really close to pure. They're less than 2 cents away. They're 1.98 cents or something away. So they're less than a 50th of a semitone away from being pure, whereas the major thirds are 7/50ths away from being pure. The reason that I played in 31 note equal temperament, and the reason that 31 note even exists, it gives you major thirds that are really, really close to pure, but the perfect fifths are bad.
Mm.
So, you know, when you divide equally, you're creating certain points along the spectrum, if you like, and those points have to be equidistant, have the same ratio with each other. So in 12 note equal temperament, we've got this 12th root of 2 stepping thing multiplying. And so too in 31 note, you've got the 31st root of 2, which is quite different. But whole number multiples or squarings, whole number powers of the starting interval, be it the 31st root of 2 or the 12th root of 2, they land somewhere. They have to land in a certain place. And how close they are to the just intonation intervals is going to mean whether that particular division gets chosen as functional or not. We've chosen 12 note divisions because the fifths are so good. The major thirds are quite out, but we've learned how to accept them. In 31 note music, the major thirds are really, really tight. They're less than a cent away from pure, but the perfect fifths are like 7 or 8 cents out. They're out, and so they sound out.
So in like the 31 note equal temperament, you could actually have a circle of thirds then?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
it would have less error in it than our current cycle of fifths does.
Yeah, because like
Yeah.
the circle of fifths, like you don't actually get to the, well, I guess it would be the seventh octave or whatever. Like it's not, what would that be? Two, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 128. It's like not actually 128th times the frequency of the octave. You
Yeah.
have to go all the way around to
It's the
get.
difference between 2 to the power of 7 and 3 over 2 to the power of 12.
Okay. I got it. Oh,
That's,
okay, cool. Because 3 over 2 to the power of 7 would be 7/5.
yeah, 3 over 2 to the power of 12 is very close to 7 octaves. If you stack 12 fifths on each other on the piano, it is the same as, but the Pythagorean comma is the difference between 12 stacked perfect fifths and 7 stacked octaves,
Got it.
where everything's pure.
What's the difference? You know, do you know that, Matt? Do you
I'll
know
just
that
do it
number?
on the calculator. So 2 to the power of 7,
So 2 to the power of 7, so 7 octaves.
128,
Got it.
right? And this is us calling our fundamental frequency 2,
If
right?
anyone's watching this right now and you don't have glasses on, by the way, go get your glasses. Also, this is very much a glasses conversation. Get your calculators.
And then 3 on 2 is 1.5 to the power of 12.
Drum roll, please.
129.74.
Got it.
Now, we've got to express the difference as a ratio. So I'm going to divide 129.74633 by 128. And so the ratio of the Pythagorean comma is 0.0136432647.
And so there's some other commas that you would get into based on other types, like in like the cycle of thirds in a 31 step equal temperament octave. You're also going to have a different kind of comma then.
Exactly. It's
And
called, it's,
how does that? And then that one's like closer than the Pythagorean comma. It's a smaller number. It's closer to.
I believe it is.
Uh-huh.
I have to, I think it
Yeah,
is.
that's like a
Certainly
whole
because
kind of
it
calculator.
it would be if the major thirds in 31 were closer to pure than the perfect fifths in 12 closest to pure. You'd have to compare those two ratios. Yeah.
What group of yours played in the 31 equal temperament?
Look, it was run by this old guy who's now dead. His name was Bill Coates, Coates. If he was still alive, he'd be over 100 now. So I'm going back 25 years because it was when I lived in the Blue Mountains. he was an academic. He'd held the chair in early music studies at Oxford University. So he was a serious music scholar who focused on early music, by which we mean, 14th, 15th, 16th century music in Western music history. And then as a young man in the early not that young necessarily, but in the early 1950s, he went to India and he had a reel-to-reel player recorder, and he got interested in the microtonal tunings of Indian music, the southern and the northern, the Carnatic and the different sorts of Indian music. And he recorded a whole lot of Indian musicians performing in small concerts on his reel-to-reel. Amazing archive of really quite rare recordings from that time. And then he got that interest in microtones and the tuning systems that were being used in the late medieval and Renaissance periods in Europe. There's a treatise, a paper written by an Italian musical theorist in the 16th century about 31-note octave divisions, speculating about it.
He was turned on to it, or he just discovered that after he was already?
I think he discovered it afterwards, yeah. But then there's this group of musicians in Holland who've built synthesizers and keyboards with 31-note keyboards layouts.
Crazy.
It's called the archiphone.
Like 2 rows of keys. What's it called? I want to look.
I'll show you. Archiphone. ARCHIPHONE.
So what instrumentation did you have in this group that was playing in the 31-note octave or 31-tone octave?
Bill played an electronic archiphone. He had a synthesizer that was set up to do it. Okay, I've just if I share this screen, you'll see the keyboard layout. I played the clarinet, and so I could use my embouchure and microtonal adjustments on the holes.
Oh, trippy.
So this is like Bill.
They're like typewriter keys?
Plastic buttons.
Awesome.
That's not very big. There's no large images. How do I get big images, please? Large. Give me large ones.
Well, that won't actually make them big on your screen, though. It's gotten like more.
Yeah, look at the largest one, 628 by 325.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
But if you click it and then just pinch your trackpad or whatever, we can see it. But regardless, I get it. It looks like, what's interesting is like, have you played with any of these like MPC type keyboards? Like what was just shown like down the lower right there, that thing says standalone. Are you using it in like modern music production?
Yeah, look, I've had a couple of things that do that, MIDI controllers and stuff, but
yeah, like folks map scales to those keys, and the way that they look are just like strange, It's like well, this is a strange device. So there was the archiphone, you play clarinet,
and the third member was a trombone player.
Yeah.
And of course, they can get in between the notes. It took me about
have just huge ears.
And there was a system of notation for it as well, where you indicated roughly within each tone, you've got 5 steps. 6 5s are 30. You get very close to 1/5 of tone is the unit that we're working in. So there was a system of notation for a half sharp, and then the ordinary sharp, and then an ordinary flat was not the same as an ordinary sharp. They were a step away from each other. So you had, say, here's your C and here's your D. You had your C half sharp, then your C sharp, then your C 1.5 sharps, which was the same as D flat, and then a D half flat, and there were essentially 5 steps, and there was a system of notation. So we were working with charts. They were Bill's compositions.
But you're actually using like staff paper like we would in a 12-note system, and then just having a different kind of
accidental methods. Yeah, all the accidentals were coded differently. And so we practiced every Saturday morning for 2 or 3 hours. Then we'd all go to the Chinese restaurant for lunch afterwards or whatever, But it took me about 3 or 4 months to start hearing the intervals in their own right, instead of hearing Oh, that's a really flat D.
Right.
Oh no, that's the note that I want. That's called this in this system. It took quite a few months of exposure to
Were
start
you
hearing it in its
also
own
like
right.
playing and recording in like 12 tone equal temperament at the
I
same
was, I
time?
was, I was working in 12 note every day, and then every
Oh, so
Saturday
was
morning.
it just strange to go back and forth, I'm sure?
It was, it
Yeah.
was.
You're like, your hollow D is sharp. You're like, what? That's interesting. Cool. Do you
Yeah,
have recordings of that music?
on a cassette somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm
Hey,
not sure if I've got a cassette player that'd work. We
right.
played
That's
live a few times. You know, this was in the Blue Mountains, and so there were people who were willing to listen to anything there. There's a lot of artistic, artistically interested people in
yeah.
difference. You know,
Was it pretty dissonant music, or like just conceptually, or
it just depended. It could sound way more consonant if you were playing those beautiful major thirds. It would sound beautiful.
yeah.
And in fact, Bill had worked out how to play the first Bach prelude, the C major prelude, on the archiphone, and
Wow.
it sounded really nice. The tuning was lovely. You remember earlier I was talking about Bach's method of tweaking the perfect fifths
Yeah.
by stretching and shrinking them. Yeah, that's actually encoded on the front piece of his well-tempered clavier with little squiggles. It's kind of strange.
Wait, so what do you mean with little squiggles? Oh, it's like shows it on the sheet music.
It's sort of encoded. I'll show you.
Yeah, we're gonna get to see into like Bach friends. Like the rumor is he was like deep in the mystery traditions and secret societies and such. Is it a
Bach
harp?
and, Bach and Handel and Scarlatti, all born in 1685. So
What is there an astrological signature then you see for the three of them in that year?
it'd be very interesting to look at.
Yeah,
It might have happened again in 1809, 1810 when Chopin, Liszt and Schumann were all born.
I think we don't have a birth time for Bach.
Uh, so here's a facsimile of the front piece that Bach wrote. Is that you can?
Yeah, it's clear. It's showing up a little bit. So
Yeah. Now
squiggles, you're telling
across
me?
across the top, those little spirally, squiggly things.
Yeah.
That's a code for the size of his perfect fifths.
Whoa. What a trip. Well, this cat's like playing in like a small church in random nowhere. It's like amazing. Are you into Keith Jarrett?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
do like.
I just listened to this interview with, I didn't know until last night. A friend of mine told me that he had a couple strokes in 2018 and he lost he can't play with his left hand anymore.
Yeah,
Um, but he was describing himself in this interview as with Rick Beato, who's got a wonderful YouTube channel. Um, that he like, if he had to call himself anything, that he's a Bachian, which is pretty cool to see.
yeah.
Here's Bach to the best of my understanding. I mean, it's a 12 p.m. chart, so usually I would just either find a sunrise time or cast that like 0 Aries or something to that effect. And take some angles off of there. Um,
Well, so much. I mean, the Pisces stuff there just jumps
feels
out.
very true.
I'm
And
yeah, and
the moon
I'm gonna
might
say
be
that
Aquarius, but given Bach, probably Pisces moon, yeah.
hard to say
But
because there's
there's no
nothing
like
else.
at least
As,
in kind of like a Ptolemaic thing when we're looking generationally at like at this year where these three great kind of composers come through, you'd expect maybe some kind of like outer planet interaction. Uh,
now, what calendar have you got going there? Because I thought Bach was the 21st of March, not the 31st.
I think maybe I had to adjust it to make it map to the tropical zodiac at some point.
Hmm.
Um, Let me see. Let's look at. Check out this. Like, I mean, this is involving Mars, who moves quickly, but it is Uranus quintile Pluto.
Yeah,
which, this isn't something that folks who have done like the generational, like Planet Play have looked into the quintiles and whatnot, but I wouldn't shock me if that was part.
Hmm.
Let's look at Bach. See what they have up at Astrodienst.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
yeah. I
they're
just saw the
saying March
2131 thing
21st,
there.
but it's March 21st Julian calendar.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's what I had to do to get
Yep.
this Aries
Convert it
degree.
to the Gregorian. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
because I mean, it's right around the Gregorian Advent as well, right? Which is
True.
an interesting thing to consider.
Well, Bach was a good Lutheran, so he probably
Was he good? I mean, he beat up a trombone player, didn't he? Or like, no, bassoon. I guess there weren't probably trombones in Bach's thing, but like, I think it was like a bassoon or an oboe player. Like Bach spent a night in jail because he just couldn't tolerate how bad this guy was, and like incapable of playing his music. Um,
oh look,
yeah,
it's
I'm like very interested in this quintile arrow, as some call this.
mm,
Well, you had mentioned before, and I'm running out of time, and we've kept you for so much of yours, but to look at your fifth harmonic chart. So, what was the thing that?
you'll see a triple conjunction of Mercury, Neptune, and Uranus,
Yeah,
because that's a quintile string in my chart. And also you'll see the triple conjunction of um, if you put my ascendant as one of the data points in there, you'd see a triple
it's
conjunction of.
there as this ascendant,
Okay, well there you go, triple
fifth harmonic
conjunction of
position.
Jupiter Moon. So I've got three
Yeah,
planets
I mean,
forming two
Mercury,
quintiles.
Neptune, Uranus, but also Node in the IC, right? You get this huge kind of just stellium of space in there. Um,
Mm.
And then it's fun here. I kind of accidentally left this on fives, so the fives of the five become the 25th harmonic.
Cool.
And some of those look quite strong. David Cochran's yeah, like, look, you have an exact Mars Saturn biquintile in the fifth harmonic, so
Wow.
that's going to be exactly conjunct in your
So
25th
a
harmonic.
25th harmonic.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, Cochran's been very interested in, I mean, he goes like into pretty high numbers now. And like, there's like cats like David Hamblin, whose work I'm sure you've seen in like The Spirit of Numbers, where he's on like this exploration of primes. But that's based upon this kind of, I'll say theory that the 27 behaves like 9 behaves like 3. Right? Like for me, it's not just about prime numbers, it's about non doubles
Yeah.
of harmonics you found your way to already,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So that like 9 is a different animal than 3, even though
Just
it's
hold
really just a
just
trine.
hold that book up again. I just want to grab a
Oh, this
screenshot.
is as long as you're screenshotting. This one, it's like cool resource, especially since you already know so much of this. They're new, these vibrational astrology study guides.
Okay.
Um, right, so this is like David Cochran's work where it's kind of like hard to get after it besides on his YouTube channel.
Mm.
I will tell you my favorite, oh gosh, it's not in here. My favorite harmonic astrology book that I've found, and I have, I think, all of them, and a lot of them I'm like, but it's called Working with Astrology. Do you have that text? It's
Uh,
it's become very expensive, unfortunately. So you
yeah.
might find some copies laying around in Australia. Um, but it's Charles Harvey and
Okay.
Michael Harding. It's a three-part book. Like one treats harmonics, one's a treatise on astrocartography, and the other on midpoints.
Yeah. Okay.
And their harmonic work is super cool. They do a ton of chart examples.
Yeah.
What's your feeling around what the fifth harmonic is or describes?
Look, I've very early on, I started studying astrology nearly 40 years ago, and as a young man, I I immediately picked up on the harmonic sort of connection thing, and so it's hard for me to say. I've always thought of that fifth harmonic in its role within music as introducing the major third.
Right.
You've
It's like
got
it
your,
introduces happiness.
that's it. You've got the root and the fifth, but as well as introducing the major third, it simultaneously brings in the minor sixth. Because if you go up and up to the, you go from C up to E, you've got your major third, but then from E up to C, you've got your minor sixth. And the
Right.
minor sixth is a very sad interval in the right context as
Well, I
well.
mean, in a way, because it introduces, since we already have the fifth, it introduces the major triad. It
Yeah.
also brings the minor third, right?
Well, the 6 on 5 is the next
Yeah.
is the first minor third you get with the next one. So the sixth harmonic, in a sense, brings in the minor third. But so that, yeah, the playfulness, the like I'm I, the connection I have with young people, because I teach a bunch of them, and I have for 45 years. I've been teaching kids how to play music for all my life since I started doing that when I was 15. And so there's this for me, when I sometime later discovered that I had all these fifth harmonics in my chart, um, it just made perfect sense that I'm just into, we play music. That word play is just, and you're very playful as well. Some people are really playful with their thinking and other people are not. Um, and so it's that, especially with Mercury, Uranus, and Neptune in quintiles and biquintiles. It just, Mercury's connection with the fingers as well. I mean, I'm lucky. I've just had natural technique and dexterity. I've practiced a bit, but not a whole lot. I don't practice much. I just play a lot. So playing, of course, is developing your technique as well when you're playing with other people. And I've
Yeah,
just
and I
always
mean,
done.
how much are you interested in houses and signs and harmonic charts? Do you pay attention to them?
I haven't, no,
You know,
because
I'm
the signs, the
I'm
signs
finding that
just,
they work. Yeah, they're like, but they're like signs within signs. They're like mini zodiacs within zodiacs.
okay. So yeah, So
And
the
I'm
part of
really
fortune and the Taurus.
surprised by it, but again and again, I'm actually seeing that they speak. Like, so you have like Venus and Libra in the 10th in your fifth harmonic chart.
Okay,
That's only if you, by the way, use equal houses from the harmonic ascendant, which is a
okay,
practice, right? Because the midheaven can be in the first house, and like it can be conjunct the ascendant, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
some people will look at equal houses from the harmonic midheaven to kind of map out career implications, if you will, of the different harmonic sections. But
Look,
so
it's
if you do equal divisions of, the this 72-degree circle, I guess as weird as this is. But by the way, I see it as like 5 octaves,
yep,
right? So like my 360 comes from 72 plus 72 plus 72.
yep.
Uh, but yeah, like if I pay attention to this by sign, it becomes intriguing, And then like the Moon Venus square, which isn't that strong, and it's kind of out of harmonic orb, that would be a conjunction in the 20th harmonic. But like, the 15th is strong in you, right? Like these
Yeah,
trines in the five. Coltrane has really strong 15, which I'm intrigued by.
and the bunch of planets in the fifth house
Right.
is creative play, teaching children how to play music.
Yeah.
The the Moon Jupiter on the ascendant, that kind of receptivity that I've got to have to hear what that student's wanting to do. I mean, I'm hearing or intuitively.
Yeah.
I'm not a teacher who teaches this method. I teach a different method for every student I've got.
Right. You teach them the student's method. I mean, the other piece is it's like Capricorn rising with Saturn in Leo, right? Like if you do pay attention to signs, and that can be
Interesting.
intriguing.
Look, it's worth looking at for sure. I feel. I mean, that's just what we're talking about here. Is just, there's something really fractal in the nature of harmonics as well, and tone color, and horoscopes or charts. There's time.
Yeah, and I feel like the music will really help us get after, because what can you do? Like you can try to like you refer to different numerological systems around what a 27 is. Um, you can look at the very few resources of people who have explored this. You can look at a bunch of charts where people have that in strength. You can wait for the moon to be some kind of 12/27ths away from the sun and see if you can just feel what 27 is and their tidal flow, right? Like it's pretty tricky because in a way it's new, but it's also as old as sound, you know. Um, so yeah, I'm intrigued by exploring this more and more through the harmonic series, and this conversation's really helped as I knew it would. So thanks for that, Greg. I have one other question for you, which maybe could just be like a seed for another conversation in the future. So it's intriguing to me that the first new notes introduced through the harmonic series being from the musical fifth from the third harmonic, and then because the fourth, like the second, is an octave, it does not introduce a new note, but the fifth harmonic brings you the musical third, and so now we have the major triad, which is a very happy and triumphant thing, and it almost kind of feels like, see, that's like your natural vibration, right? But in it, like, it, I would almost therefore expect the seventh harmonic to bring me the major seventh, but it brings, as you know, the minor seventh or the dominant seventh, and it's pretty far from like, accuracy from an equal temperament point of view
I
in a way.
reckon it sort of, the seventh harmonic to me just sort of brings something sexy into the equation.
Hmm.
There's that blues chord, chord 1/7, you know,
Yeah.
your seventh chord, the blues, something there.
Yeah, I mean, another interesting thing is like, the seventh brings a seventh, the 11th brings an 11th, that brings the fourth, the 13th brings a 13th. It's like only the three and five and they're reversed, right? The third harmonic brings a musical fifth, and the fifth a musical third. Like otherwise, though, like they're in different kind of tunings and
It's interesting,
approximations.
isn't it? It's interesting because, the ninth, you can consider it as bringing a ninth.
Yeah. Yeah, so what's up with that?
But, but,
Right.
but we're transposing octaves a lot in kind of
Right, we're
doing
bringing all these things down or looking at like 9/8, right? You're up in the second octave or the
that.
third octave when you're making that consideration, right? And then you're bringing it down in. Now,
Yeah.
I'm just like my birthday, I'm gonna get a two-string harmonium and just really get to start playing with those different ratios and moving bridges and get all Pythagorean with it, right? I'm excited to see
Good.
what I find there because, a thing that also like this talk has helped me kind of see is like, well, part of this is just like integer relationships and that brings consonant sound, right? That like brings intervals that just seem agreeable and settled to our ears and that.
Yeah. The low number ratios, the product wave has more coherence per wavelength, if you
Right.
like.
So like as you're saying, like a sixth interval, like I can get that with three and five. So I really don't have to go any further than the fifth harmonic for that, in the sense that to get introduced, as long as I'm willing to invert chords, right? I mean, basically is what it comes down to. But
Yep.
like, if I'm playing on my horn, and if I was able to hit them really well, and I'm just like on C, and I'm just going through the harmonics, and I'm playing C, C, G, C, E, G, you're right, like through, I guess then B flat, C. Um, like I would actually have to play 27 harmonics to get to an A. And
Yeah.
if
Which, according to which A you're trying to get to. Yeah. Trying to get to the closest to an equal temperament A.
right, yeah, well, so there's a good question. Like, is that not an A? So, like, oh, let me look at that. So 1/27. So 5/3, right, is a way that's like that's an A. I mean, sorry,
Yeah.
that's a major sixth.
Yes. Yep.
So that's 1.6666. So 1/27, and I would have to multiply this until it's in that world, right?
Mm.
Or would I do the
So
5/3 and
if
multiply that till it equals 27? I think the same way.
if we go 5/3 and then we start doubling it,
until it equals 27, right? Or
close to
would it be
27.
doubling it or oh yeah,
So, well, you get to
octaves,
20, you get to 26.666666666. So you get very
which
close
is
to 27.
pretty far from 27.
Yeah, but up there, it's not very
That's
far in terms of intervals.
That's just kind of like harmonic charts, right? Like once you're in 27, something like 10 degrees apart, it's like, no, that's 10 over 27. It's like a
And
very small orb in the
you know,
neighborhood.
10 hertz difference on the bottom of the piano can be a perfect fourth, whereas 10 hertz difference at the top of the piano is less than a semitone.
Whoa, trippy.
Okay, because it's logarithmic.
Right, I was going to ask you that about the frets on the guitar. Are they logarithmic as well?
Yeah, yeah, that's why they get progressively smaller.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And so, like, if you wanted to play in the 31 interval band on guitar, you need something fretless for sure.
yeah, it'd be unwieldy if it had frets, and
Yeah.
that's the other thing. If you go to, there's been all these experiments and calculations in order to get. You remember I was saying 31 note equal division gets you very close to pure major thirds,
Yeah.
but lousy fifths. Turns out if you go to 72 notes per octave,
Interesting.
which is a lot of notes for one octave,
It is.
then you can get good thirds and good fifths,
Wow.
but nowhere in between. So it turns out that the next closest one for good major thirds is 72. 31 gives you very good major thirds. To get any closer, you've got to go up to 72. But any instrument designed for 72 notes to an octave is kind of unwieldy and unplayable. And
I'm sure, but an odd thing is like 72 and 12 are, married, right? 72 is 6/12s, but it's not two 31s or
no,
is it
it's
two and a
just
third 31s maybe?
where those divisions fall is the distribution of the points that are equal divisions and how far away they are from the points as defined by the harmonic series. And there's something about nature that is not like, our cycle of fifths makes music look like a closed system, doesn't it? We say, oh, we've got these 12 keys. You don't have to learn an infinite number of keys. It's a circle, it's not a spiral. There's something about nature that tends to open-ended spirals somehow.
Right. So I mean, basically, when we're trying, like in a sense, the octave isn't even a, a doubling, right? There's no circle. It's going to be up here somehow, and you get this
Yeah.
spiraling thing. And then the hope is to like torus it and bring it back in, right? To like tame it and create something like a circle. So 31 times 2 and a third is 72. It's actually 72 and a third. But that's kind of, I think, where you get into that space. I mean, that's so intriguing because, of course, 72 years in a day of the great year, um,
Mm.
and all the other wonderful 72. It's in the eclipse.
Yeah, look, I remember my dad said to me when he was turning 72 and I rang him up to say happy birthday. And he said, oh, yes, I'm 3 to the power of 2 times 2 to the power of 3.
Yeah, I like your dad. Is there another place where fifths come through between 12 and 72? Does it happen at like a 24 note
I'm
division?
not sure. I just remember reading in order to get really
Threes and
close
fives.
thirds.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would imagine it wouldn't be too hard to build a spreadsheet that could do it. I've got a friend who could build a spreadsheet. You could quickly enter in the number of divisions and see what the frequencies are, see what the frequency ratios are. Yeah, I'm not sure about where you'd have to go up to get really good fifths. It turns out that the fifths we've got aren't too bad. When you hear a perfect fifth played on the piano, it's not the same as a just intonation fifth, but it's so close that the interference, the dissonance, is a very low frequency dissonance. It's only cycling in and out, when we're talking about product tones or difference tones. The great thing about just intonation is that the difference tones are in tune with the source notes. If you have the Tallis scholars singing, the sopranos are singing a pure 5-on-4, then their difference tone is here's the 5 and here's the 4. The difference tone is 2 octaves below the 4. Say that top note's 500 hertz and then the note below it's 400 hertz.
Right.
The difference tone is 100 hertz, which is in octave relationship with the 400.
Right. Okay, cool. So,
and then when you change that by a little bit, suddenly a difference tone is no longer in tune with the source interval.
got it, right. Because the difference tone, it's like the ghost fundamental, right? So if I'm playing a musical fifth, I'm actually playing the relationship between the third and the second harmonic. And so the fundamental that I've, like, to use the saxophone thing that I've kind of eliminated here, like it has to still be a being, and that's the difference tone. Like that's the ghost in the machine, yeah?
So if this note's 300 hertz and this one's 200 hertz, there's our perfect fifth. They both third and second harmonics respectively of 100 hertz. Yeah. So when you sound, you've heard it on saxophone, I'm sure, playing with another saxophone player, you both play high notes. There's a third note in the room.
Yeah.
It's happening in the air. The elasticity of the air produces that pitch. And that's what that combination waveform was looking like when I was showing those graphs of the combination waveforms.
Yeah.
If they've got a lot of coherence, then if the difference is between two notes that are in a low number ratio with each other, then the difference tone is in an octave or harmonious relationship with those two source tones.
Right, and it's the fundamental of whatever harmonic relationships you're playing between the two. Yeah,
And you only have to tweak it a little bit and you lose that accuracy. So when you hear sacred choral music written in the 16th century, sung by the Tallis scholars, and you feel the kundalini going up in your spine, the shivers, and oh my God, this music is so beautiful. It's because the difference tones are in tune with the main notes that you're hearing.
wow.
It's
Yeah,
a whole
Have
experience.
you seen like the Giza power plant theory? It's like God, what is that man? Christopher Dunn. He basically believes Great Pyramid was built to be like a harmonic resonator with like the ohm, like the earth natural vibration. And does some pretty cool, like takes that theory pretty far and like does good math and stuff. He's an engineer. It's a pretty dry work, the Giza power. It's called Giza Power Plant.
Okay.
But definitely written by an engineer, But it's a pretty cool theory. And that would, in a sense, it's like you could also get two vibrating things. If you could get two vibrating things at like super higher harmonics for like the ohm of the universe, they would like sound that difference tone, right? You know what I mean? Like you could create energy in that way, and that's what I'm gonna be dreaming about tonight. And so many other things. Greg, thank you so much. I'm glad we like sent this live on YouTube. There's actually a few people here live right now. You brave mystics, you. Especially the two of them wrote. I don't speak music, but this is cool. Right on. Hey, please tell Andrew I say hey. All right, it's been a while since I've seen him.
Yeah, I'll be seeing him next Saturday. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I love that guy, Andrew Smith, and his astrology. And I
Yeah.
love you and yours, and it's really fun to spend some time. I very much appreciate the teachings. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah. Okay. Look, thanks, Brett. And I don't know if you've got any plans to come out to Australia.
Not on the books right now, but I'd love to get back there. I really want to spend more time with the Southern Hemisphere sky, like a long period of time. So it's like I've been to Australia twice, but the first time I wasn't looking, and the second time it was rather cloudy, and then
Yeah.
in Peru, I was able to connect to the Southern Hemisphere sky and really was activated by it. But there's something like I just need to be in that space, and I'd love to hang out and attempt to play a 31 note octave with you. So
Look, play some old saxophones together. It'd be fun.
yeah, it'd be totally fun. I would love to. It'll happen someday for sure. Thanks again for being here.
Okay, Brett. Thank you.
All right. Well, when stars align, it'll happen again. We'll take it further.
Okay, mate.
You hear the 72 note octave.
Okay, well,
All right.
I'll look up the maths of it. Okay.